Hold on to your butt.
Da-da-da. You were saying?
Welcome to episode 93 of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast. Tonight, I am joined by the guy that is going to have to throw all of his baseball support towards that team that I cheer for in Cleveland, Darren Weeks.
Well, it's digging deep right there when you're getting the good old Cleveland Guardians talk, Mary. Which
They
is
will
very
forever
good.
be the Indians. Oh, by the way, I'm Mary.
Congratulations to your Cleveland Guardians/Indians for winning the division.
Yep.
Wow, who the heck would have
You
thought?
swore they won the World Series, the amount that they were cheering.
If the Red Sox were playing golf, they would have finished first because they had the lowest score by far. So we're on to that. So what's going on with you? It's been a couple weeks since we recorded. We have ourselves anyway. It's been a little while.
Yeah. Last week we recorded with Dane and Brett from the National Civil War Museum in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So they were awesome to join us for that. It's a really great episode. It's not on YouTube, unfortunately. We were having some video issues, so we couldn't put it on there. But yeah, definitely check it out on. We obviously have the sound of it on our usual podcast download places. I can't think or talk tonight for some reason. Grad school is like rocking my brain big time. But anyway, here we are recording. It's great to be back. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. So I'm going to ask you, okay, what are you drinking tonight as we warm this one up?
Okay, I am drinking Forever New England Game Day IPA by Cisco Brewers out of Nantucket. So obviously it's got the New England Patriots on the beer can there. It's pretty good actually. And I am drinking it out of, I can say the North Civil War Champions mug. And how about you? What are you drinking tonight?
Well, thanks for asking me. I really appreciate it. I'm drinking, good old-fashioned Yuengling, because that's what I had left in the fridge. And I'm drinking it out of my Antietam mug here, because this episode sort of dovetails a little bit into Antietam. We're not going to talk about Antietam really directly, but it sort of leads to it.
You do have a nice hat, though, before we get into it.
Thank you.
I
appreciate it. It's our new company hat. It's very cool. Thanks for noticing. I appreciate it. Let me ask you a question, Mary. And have you ever lost something really important to you? Maybe something that I don't know, maybe like a cell phone at a bar or something like that.
I knew you were going to bring that up. Yes.
That maybe something you really wanted to hold on to, but then it just couldn't find it. Did that ever happen to you?
Yes, it has. And it actually happened in Fredericksburg.
Happened twice in Fredericksburg, as I remember.
No,
but listen, that's right, in Gettysburg too. I forgot about that. One battlefield at a time. So you'll be happy, that losing important things has happened as long as there have been things to lose for the most part. Today we are going to talk about Robert E. Lee's Special Orders 191, or as they are commonly known as Lost Order 191. The Lost Order, it may be one of the most discussed and maybe, I don't want to say overblown, but certainly most dissected things, maybe in the entire Civil War, when you really think about it.
And it's still very debated. And the thing that we want to do with this episode, it's one we've wanted to do for a while. It's something that interests us a lot is, this is a thing that there is still a lot of debate over. There's also a lot of misconceptions, especially around the timeline, which I know you're going to go into detail about that, but too, just the way it's been written about in the historical record, in a few secondary sources, I think has, it's portrayed a certain way. And the one thing, it's like, we're not being pro McClellan with this. It's sad we have to preface it like that, but we're not being pro McClellan. We're just trying to tell the story. And I don't think Lincoln's going to come into it very much at all, because this isn't really a Lincoln McClellan thing. This is like a McClellan and Army of Potomac and General Lee thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, some historians make it out to be a really big deal, such as Stephen Sears, for example. He says, and I quote, "In the annals of military intelligence, there is nothing quite like it." He goes on to compare it to the importance of the code breakers in World War II. Some historians really, use the finding of this order really to attack McClellan, as you mentioned, who sat on this discovered treasure for over 12 hours before doing anything about it. And as you read the sources and you read some of the primary stuff, you realize that it's a very confusing thing, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Needless to say, Lost Order 191, if anything, is really a treasure trove of misconceptions. And it's really definitely something that you really want to take a deep dive into to see how important the discovery of this Lost Order really, really was, right?
Yeah.
So I hate to do this. But we have to turn back time again and go back in the Wayback Machine for you.
Back time.
The beginning of Lee's 1862 Maryland campaign to get a full picture of this, right? Now, you probably don't remember we did the episode of this because this is back during your dark black hair days. So you probably forgot about this one.
Okay.
Okay. But we have to talk about it. The summer of 1862, there was that real sea change for
Hmm.
the strategies of really both armies. Up to that point, the Confederacy was playing that really tight role of defense while the Union was on offense, right? George McClellan's Peninsula Campaign in Virginia. It's aimed to seize Richmond. That was underway. And the Rebs' primary goal was defending the capital from Mac's army, who felt that sacking Richmond could bring the end of the war,
Hmm.
right? That's what was going on. So the change occurred at the Battle of Seven Pines, or the Battle of Eight Pines, we
Yep.
like to call it, right? When Rebel Commander Joseph E. Johnson was injured, opening the door for Rebel President Jefferson Davis to appoint Robert E. Lee to command the
Hmm.
Army. This is after that fantastic one-day reign of Gustavus Smith, by the way. No one ever
Yeah.
talks about it. Keep that in mind, right? Now, Lee, of course, everybody knows Robert E. Lee is the hero of the Mexican War. He's a commandant at West Point. Was really up to that point was really just a military advisor to Robert E. Lee. He
Yeah.
helped straighten out maybe the coastal defenses of Virginia. He helped the defenses of Richmond, but he really was just an advisor at that point, despite his background. Now, on July 1st, 1862, Lee is going to take command and it will change the Army strategy almost
Yeah.
immediately. So instead of that playing defense that they were so used to doing, Lee decides the best defense is really a good offense,
Hmm.
right? So what will result will be that 7 days battles aimed at protecting Richmond. But instead of defending Richmond, he's defending it by driving McClellan away from Richmond with that series of offensive attacks.
Yep.
Okay. Despite some early problems, specifically when Stonewall Jackson goes AWOL at the beginning and disappears for a while,
Yeah.
Lee was able to get Mac to evacuate his supply place at a place called White House Landing and retreat back to a place called Harrison's Landing. So this is really the end of the Peninsula Campaign. It drives his supply base is gone. He's driving them back. McClellan, he's going to call this retreat merely a change of base, which is a military equivalent of coming home drunk and telling your girlfriend you have a change of sobriety. That's kind of how it was, right? Fun fact, by the way, at this Harris's Landing is where Daniel Butterfield wrote Taps,
Yep.
by the way.
Interesting.
So there you
Very
go.
cool.
Many raised bugle calls. So for Lee taking McClellan off that dance floor opened the door to focus on another Union army also in Virginia. This is John Pope's Army of Virginia.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, I know we're going to be talking about Lost Order 191, but it's important to know that these lost orders were not uncommon. Okay.
Hmm.
As a matter of fact, Lost Order 191 was the fifth lost order that happened in the summer of 1862 alone. These things kept disappearing. While Lee was hunting down John Pope's army, like we just said, Jeb Stuart's cavalry was sitting in a place called Verdiersville, Virginia. This is on August 18th, 1862.
Yeah.
Jeb is sitting around by an unguarded ford, and he's waiting for Fitz-Lee to get there. He hears some horses in the distance. Oh, this is him. Turns out it's the 1st Michigan Cavalry. Oops. So Stuart's going to jump on his horse. He's going to haul ass to the woods to escape. But when he does, he leaves two important things behind. First, his plume hat.
Yeah.
He loses his hat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Isn't this
Second,
where Buford gets his plume hat? He steals it from him. Well,
I'm
doesn't
not
steal
sure
it,
that
but he
that's
finds it.
Yeah. So the other thing he finds Lee's orders that really discuss the plan they were going to use to attack Pope. Like I said, they were going to go and attack Virginia.
Yeah.
So these orders get turned into Pope, and when he learns about them, he's going to take off across the Rappahannock before the attack could happen. Okay, so this is another big battle. A week later, Catlet Station. Okay, Jeb Stuart's going to get his he's going to return the favor a little bit. He's going to raid Pope's headquarters this time. He's going to find a bunch of dispatches left behind, including troop numbers, reinforcements, all kinds of stuff. This intel was key in help setting up the Battle of Second Manassas a week later.
Mm-hmm.
My point here is these lost orders that you hear about are not that uncommon.
No.
And
no,
couriers were commonly caught all the time, and both sides gathered information on them about that were used in these battles. But some, though, they make this Lost Order 191 this once in a lifetime thing. Oh my God. And the reality is not that it's not really true. We're going to talk about how the impact it did have, because it does have an impact specifically on Lee. For the most part, it wasn't something that just never happened. It happened
No, and
actually quite a bit.
it is made out to be that way. Like if you read Sears, and I mean Sears is amazing. I mean, Landscape Turned Red is a great, an amazing book about Antietam. He's got a book about Gettysburg. But if you're to read him, it seems like, oh my God, this is like the first and only time this has ever happened. And like you said, that's not the case. And like my question is, why don't we hear about these other lost orders? Because it's really intriguing. Because if it makes you wonder how many of these lost orders are connected to certain battles happening, and why we just don't talk about them more. But you have to remember too, like it's the 1860s. They're not texting each other like we do today. These are like couriers that are taking them places, right? And in some cases, they're being delivered by spies too, right? And spies get caught.
Right.
You know?
This one was a big deal because the players involved, the rumors that came out afterwards, the media making a big deal about it.
Yeah, and just
But
the whole thing with like, oh, I didn't lose them. As we'll get to it. Spoiler alert: D.H. Hill being like, I didn't lose it.
no, no, but just get to the timeline just so we can get there. So after the Second Manassas, that hammer versus nail
Mm-hmm.
Confederate victory that we talked about on our second episode, Mary. That's how long ago
Yes,
we talked about Second
that was
Manassas,
like
right?
over 2 years ago.
Pope's going to fall back into the defenses of Washington after getting his butt handed to him by
Yep.
Lee and Jackson and Longstreet too. But back at the White House now, Lincoln and that administration, they're at this crossroads now trying to figure out what the heck's going on with the war in the East right now.
Mm-hmm.
McClellan failed to seize Richmond. The arrogant John Pope, who's used to seeing the backs of the enemies
Mm-hmm.
running, got his ass kicked at the old battlefield at Bull Run.
Yep.
So on September 3rd, 1862, Lee's realizing that the army's in kind of a disarray. He's gonna write a letter to his boss, Jefferson Davis, and in it, he's going to explain that he wants to take the war into the North, into Maryland and Pennsylvania. Now, why does Lee want to go into Pennsylvania or Maryland, right?
Yep.
Obvious reasons.
Yeah.
He thinks he can help flip the neutral state to the Confederacy. He says, if we go in there, they're a border state, maybe we can get them to flip. The supplies is always a thing. The war had been in Virginia for a little while now. He wanted to get out of there and help feed his army.
Well, yeah,
The
because
third thing.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Also, the third thing was the politics. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
midterms were coming up here, and there were people in the North who were already tired of the war. So if you put yourself in Lee's situation, there's really no loss with this, because that the Union Army in the East is kind of in shambles.
They
Your
are.
army's doing really well, and you're doing well, and you have every advantage to do it.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. The army, the army in the East that has been defeated at Second Manassas are not doing very well. One soldier was quoted as saying, "The whole army is disgusted. You need not be surprised if success falls to the rebels with astonishing rapidity." So they think it's going to happen soon. And it's interesting. I, of course, looked at Howard's memoirs to see what he has to say about Order 191, but I went back a little bit before that, and he actually talks about Lee coming into Maryland and why he does it. And I do have some quotes from what happens when Lee gets in there, but Howard actually says that he talks about Lee doing it partly for supplies, that because he couldn't obtain anything else in Virginia, and Maryland was the place to start doing it. And and Howard even says like even Pennsylvania would have been good for him to do at this time. And because Lee is going into Maryland, the war it's transferring beyond the Confederacy now, right? Like it's going into a border state.
And this was a big deal because Lee's going to write that letter. He pops it in the mailbox, and the second he does, he doesn't wait for Javis's response. He says, "Wheels up, boys, we're going."
Yep.
Before he even gets the response back, he's going to take off. He's going to full absolute Leroy Jenkins situation here. He's going to move north into Maryland. He must have known Davis was going to okay it. Davis had that quote about Lee around that time where he said, "Confidence in you overcomes the view which we would otherwise be taken of the exposed condition of Richmond." So what's he saying? He's like, listen, I trust you to leave Richmond unexposed based on what you're saying. So here goes Robert E. Lee now. He's going to board, he's into the Potomac River, into Maryland. He's going to have 75,000 men at this time, and they're going to be crossing between September 4th and September 7th. To the astonishment of the Maryland locals, who are used to seeing these blue, crisp uniforms, now they're seeing these ragged, dirty, guys all crossing this dirty Confederate army, which they were not used to seeing. In Maryland, the Rebs started singing Maryland, my Maryland, and added that phrase, Dear mother, burst the tyrant's chain, Virginia could not call in vain.
Mm-hmm.
They're singing as they're singing along.
Yeah.
I guess they could write some songs. But what's funny is, they're going to get into Frederick, Maryland. Okay, it's a town just over the border. And Lee is going to set up his headquarters in a woodlot just north of the present-day Monocacy battlefield.
Yep. It's
across the street from the modern-day visitor center. If you
Yep.
know the area, there's some woods.
It's a cool place to go.
It is. Lee is going to write first thing he's going to do is going to write a proclamation to the citizens of Maryland, basically trying to recruit them to their cause. And he's going to write, the people of the South have long wished to aid you in throwing off this foreign yoke, to enable you again to enjoy the unalienable right of freemen and restore independence and sovereignty to your state. In obedience to this wish, our army has come among you. So he's coming and saying, well, here we are, come join us. You guys have been under this thing. And right off the bat, this is the perfect example of this army flipping. Now the Confederacy is clearly on offense.
Yep.
And the Union is clearly on defense. But this is a different strategy for Lee himself personally, too. Remember, when he quit his commission in the Union, or the Federal Army at that time, he vowed he'd only draw his sword to save the defense of Virginia.
Yep.
So this is a big change for Lee personally, too. Many of his troops, anyway, they only agreed to fight in Virginia and defend Virginia. Louis Armistead talks about that.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of them weren't happy, and many of them took off and just deserted, right? Now, Lee's plan in the North, it was a ballsy one.
Mm-hmm.
It was something. He discussed his plan with one of his generals named John Walker in Lee's tent, his headquarters over there in Frederick. And the plan astonished Walker. Just a jaw-dropping plan. Lee intended to march his army all the way to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania,
Mm-hmm.
and blow up the railroad bridge that crossed over the Susquehanna River. And Walker said Lee told him, and this is what Walker was surprised about. Lee told him, according to Walker, after that, I can turn my attention to Philadelphia, Baltimore, or Washington as what may seem best for our interest.
Mm-hmm.
Now, part of Lee's, just audacity, I guess, was certainly rooted in what was happening with the Union Army. Because don't forget, he's feeling confident, and he knows the Union Army is kind of a mess. When Lee's crossing the Potomac, Lincoln is going to reinstall George McClellan to command the Army of the Potomac, now included what was left of Pope's Army of Virginia. He knew Mac's reputation, Lee did, of being timid, and he wanted to take advantage of it. When Walker looked surprised at hearing this plan, Lee responded, and I quote, "Are you acquainted with General McClellan? He is an able general, but a very cautious one. His army is demoralized and in a chaotic condition. It will not be prepared for operations for 3 or 4 weeks." Now, this is going to prove to be a gigantic error for Lee. But this is the mindset.
Yeah.
You get an idea of looking inside the old general, what's going on in his head at this moment.
Yeah, and Howard says that when they brought McClellan back, that McClellan very quickly refitted, reorganized, but was cautious because of what had happened. And Howard does actually defend him, saying, and it's a little bit of a sense of humor coming through. He said, slowness was wise then, as we got going again, as we were refitted, as we got supplies. But then they started going towards where they thought Lee might be.
Well, he made a mistake here. The other thing Lee made a big mistake about was his attitudes of these Marylanders towards his army.
I have notes on that too.
He's expected to be welcomed with new recruits. He thought he was going to get a Laurel and Hardy handshake in the town square. And the Rebs really got a chilly reputation.
Yeah.
Right?
They
picture Theo Epstein cruising through Cleveland in 2016 around November 1st. That's the attitude he would have gotten.
Yeah. It's very similar when I was researching this episode, I thought, this is very similar to what happens to Bragg in Kentucky, right? Where they go into Kentucky and they're like, yeah, we're going to get a whole bunch of recruits and stuff. And they don't get what they expected. And Howard actually talks about this reception of Lee, and he said Confederate political leaders were disappointed with Maryland. It was too late for a few fire eaters to carry by storm the hearts of the Union Marylanders. And he also says that Lee found himself virtually in a land of lukewarm attachments to his cause, but few recruits joined him. The Confederate currency was also not willingly received as money. So it's not going as planned. And at the same time, Lincoln has issued a call for more volunteers as well. And that's another reason why Lee wants to get in there and recruit. But like as you said, like they are not getting a warm reception at all.
No, there was some who were
Yeah,
courteous.
there was a
There was
few.
some. I mean, there was a few. For the most part, they had to deal with the unfriendly citizens of Maryland, and some welcomed them, like I said, but most weren't very thrilled to see them. There was no DQ cards handed out at
I was
all,
just
which is
gonna
probably
say,
why
could you imagine rolling up to the DQ and handing over the Confederate currency, and they're
it's
like, "We don't
probably
accept that
why
here."
it's probably why Jubal Early took all the ice cream 2 years later when he went back through there.
Probably
Just keep that in mind.
took it
Okay,
from
it
the
all goes back
DQ.
to the DQ. Now, Lee's headquarters is going to be set up on the Best Farm, just north of it. Actually, if you've been there now, the house is
Mhm.
still there, but that's not where his headquarters was. He was set up in that woodlot, and he's from September 6th through 8th. Lee's army is going to be hanging around the site of the Best Farm. If you've been in Monocacy, you know the area very, very well. Um, and they could rest. Just picture men were hanging out, they're bathing in the river, and they're probably doing some whittling, and they're
Good.
just kind of relaxing in camp. But they knew they were going to be moving pretty soon, but they were just enjoying the rest and relaxation because
Mhm.
they've been marching, and now they're just enjoying the time. Now it was around this time between the 6th and the 8th, the Union Army is going to start to move. McClellan's army is going to begin to move the same day Lee's men get to Frederick.
Mhm.
Now, this vanguard, the beginning of that federal advance, is going to be the cavalry as usual. They're going to start to run into rebels as far away as the town of Hart, okay,
Mhm.
which is now Hyattsville. It's about 50 miles away from Frederick. As they get past that, they're going to get closer to Frederick. The First New York Cavalry under a guy named Alonzo Adams is going to spot cavalry from the First North Carolina near the town of Urbana. And this is the sound of this fight is going to actually disrupt a party that Jeb Stuart's attending in a place called the Landon House. He's having a great old time when he starts hearing this.
Jeb at a
So he
party?
realizes, shockingly. But what does this tell Lee? The Union Army is much closer
Mhm.
than he expected, which will be a common theme for Lee, by the way,
Yep.
especially when he goes on the north. So this rest that he's enjoying is going to have to end sooner than he expected. This usual McClellan, this passive McClellan, I mean, wasn't being very passive.
No, he's
And
not.
Lee, no, so Lee finds himself in a situation he didn't expect. He had a federal army approaching from the southeast from Washington, and he had another problem. There's a 13,000 man garrison
Mhm.
just 20 miles away at Harper's
Yep.
Ferry. So if Frederick's the middle of a clock, okay, Harper's Ferry is like 8 o'clock,
Yep.
and Washington's like 5 o'clock.
Mhm.
Lee's right in the middle. And so he realizes he's in a tough situation. Lee had hoped that his presence in Frederick was going to scare off the troops at Harper's Ferry and make them leave without a fight. But they didn't do it. They stayed. Knowing he was stuck in the middle of two armies, Lee needs a plan. So on September 9th, 1862, he's going to sit at his headquarters, he's going to pull out his pen, and he's going to write a plan called Special Orders
Mhm.
191. Now, Special Orders 191 has been a misinterpreted thing forever, like we talked about. Some say it was Lee's battle plan. Okay, it was absolutely
No.
not. It makes no reference to what his ultimate plan was. Special Orders 191 was merely a marching order. It was who's going where. Now, I want to paraphrase this real quick, okay? Special Orders 191 had 10 points,
Mhm.
10 paragraphs, and it was listed in Roman numerals 1 through 10. I'm going to leave out 1 and 2 for now and focus on 3 through 10. And there's a reason why. I'll tell you later, okay? Roman number 3. It says on September 10th, Stonewall Jackson's left wings, no corps yet, we're still talking wings, the divisions of A.P. Hill, Richard Ewell, and John Jones, they're going to pass through Middletown and move towards Sharpsburg to take control of the Baltimore Ohio Railroad. That's the third point. Number 4 just says James Longstreet's right wing is going to move west. Robert E. Lee is going to be with him towards the Catoctin Heights and over South Mountain, and they're going to head to Boonesboro, and they're going to chill, and they're going to wait there. The 5th point was the divisions of Lafayette McLaws and Richard Anderson are going to follow Longstreet towards Middletown and then head to Harper's Ferry. Basically, they're going to go to Maryland Heights to really seize the garrison there to help with the Harper's Ferry people. The next point was John Walker's division is going to take a very long roundabout route to Harper's Ferry. They're going to cross the Potomac again, kind of swing around, to take Loudon Heights, the second heights that overlook Harper's Ferry. D.H. Hill's division is going to form the rear guard. The 8th point was Jeb Stuart's cavalry is going to send troops to follow Longstreet, Jackson, and McLaws, and then basically pick up stragglers. That's all it really says. Mm-hmm. The 9th point is Jackson, McLaws, and Walker, after seizing Harper's Ferry, are going to join the main body in the army of area of Boonesboro. The 10th thing, every regiment is going to bring axes, gather wood. Nice. Very important, okay? Nice. Now, basically, all 191 does is split the army up. It just scatters the birds.
It's Lee's dividing his army, and then the end is to kind of come back together. And I mean, now, I've always wondered why people say it's a battle plan. Because the first time I heard of it, years and years ago, it was battle plan. And I remember looking it over thinking, like, what? Where's the battle?
Yeah. I think that's the popular culture and the historic memory of it, because it's for that reason. But for the most part, it was everyone split up and we're all going to meet at Boonesboro. But we have to take out the Harper's Ferry garrison, but that's how it's going to be. Now, copies of this order were made for every commander leading their column. And there was also one extra made for Richmond. So there were 7 total copies. That's how it comes down to. Every one of them was written in pen. They were each signed by Lee's assistant adjutant, a guy named Colonel Robert Chilton. He's going to sign them all. So here's what happens, though. As I mentioned before, there are no corps. There are wings. And some of these divisions would get passed, would be in one wing one day, one wing the next. Some of these divisions got passed around more than a comb on first grade picture day. That's how often they got passed around, right? But what it did, it led to confusion. One division that moved around a lot between the two was a division of Daniel Harvey Hill, D.H. Hill if you're nasty, right? For that reason, Jackson had an extra copy of this order made for Hill, since Hill would be breaking off and commanding his own column. What Jackson did not know was that Lee already had a copy made for Hill. This copy that he wrote, the second one he wrote, was in pencil. It wasn't in pen. It was in pencil, right? So on the 10th of September, the rebels, per Special Orders 191, are going to start to move out of Frederick. Now, do you remember we went to Frederick, how long it took to get the hell out of there? Okay. Frederick is a mess. It's a mess now, and it was a mess then. This was a brutal place to leave. Traffic was just as bad then as it is now. It just takes forever to get out of there. D.H. Hill's division actually didn't even get to start to go until the 11th because they were stuck in this gridlock. The day they left, the Union Army out of the 9th Corps is going to start to arrive, and they're actually going to skirmish the rear guard of Lee's army. This is going to be Wade Hampton's guys. So the Rebs are leaving almost exactly. It's like a hermit crab. Rebs go, here comes the Union to take the same exact spot. Hill's division had to wait all day on the 10th of September at a place called the Myers Farm. The Myers Farm is about a mile north of where Lee's headquarters was in the old battlefield of Monocacy. It's a gravel pit now. Unfortunately, they tore the whole thing up. It's all rocks, but they had to spend the entire day there on the 10th of September until they could finally move out on the 11th. So what happens on the 13th now is McClellan's army is pouring through the Best Farm area. They're rolling into Frederick. They're taking up that whole area. There are so many that they're clogging up the roads in town, and it's causing gridlock themselves. So as the troops are trying to come into Frederick, they have to wait and they get stuck. Because of that, many of the Union men have to wait around this Best Farm area before they can continue to proceed into Frederick. It's like sitting in traffic. You got to wait. The corps that was in the rear had to sit and wait, and this was the 12th Corps. So just picture them all squeezing themselves in. So sitting in the former rebel camp at Myers Farm, where D.H. Hill's guys were camped, is the 27th Indiana. And they were the kind of the advanced regiment for their brigade. There are going to be 2 guys named Corporal Barton Mitchell and Sergeant John Bloss who are going to be hanging out, living the life. And then Mitchell is going to see something on the ground. What's it going to be?
It's going to be an envelope, and he's going to open it up. And in that envelope are 3 cigars and the order 2 cigars. And I've read both. There's some say 2, some say 3. Anyway, 2 cigars. And a Order 191 written in pencil.
Right. So what's interesting how the Rebs did this is when the rebels delivered their messages was kind of like an early version of kind of like a certified mail
Yep.
situation. What they would do is they would take the note and they'd put it in the envelope and they'd seal it, and the courier would drop it off to wherever it was intended to go. So if I'm sending you a courier,
Hmm.
you're going to get the letter, you're going to open it, you're going to take the letter out, you're going to sign the empty envelope and give it back to the courier.
Hmm.
He's going to take it back to where he came from so they know you received it. So his empty envelope, it's signed by D.H. Hill, it's signed by
Yep.
Phipps Longstreet. Okay, he got it. So that's how they do it. People debate the 3 cigars versus 2. I think it's 2. I'll
Yeah,
tell you.
I've read
Okay.
3, and also the other myth about this is there are some sources that say that the order was found wrapped around the cigars and there was no envelope at all.
No, that's wrong. It was definitely an envelope that was
Yeah.
inside the envelope, no
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
So that's how they did it. Now Mitchell, he's gonna upon finding this letter, he knows he knew it was something important, so he brought it to his boss, a guy named Captain Peter Kopp, who then took her to the regimental headquarters. Eventually, it's going to find its way to Frederick, to McClellan, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit.
And we should mention the time that the order is found. It's found around noon on
Right.
September
We're going
the
to get
13th.
we're going to get to all that right.
Yeah.
And so it's funny, but after the war, it's funny how you were talking before is why is this whole thing important, right? After the war, this 191 became such a big deal that everyone wanted to take some kind of credit
Yeah.
for it. There was a guy named David Vance.
Mhm.
He's the one who says, I found the damn thing. But fortunately for Mitchell, Sergeant Bloss, he wrote right afterwards, and both Bloss and Mitchell got wounded at the cornfield in Antietam soon afterwards. But Bloss is going to write that Mitchell found this letter along with 2 cigars. That's why there's 2, because that's what Bloss says. Okay, but who knows? But that's what he says. Everyone wants to know what happened to the cigars. Who knows? I think they smoked them.
Oh.
Why wouldn't they? Right?
Hell, why not? I would.
But there's so many conspiracy theories about this order.
Mhm.
Like we said, after the war, most in the Confederacy blamed D.H. Hill for losing his
Yep.
orders, right? He denied it until his dying day. He actually had the damn order, the one
Yeah.
in ink. And it's down in the University of North Carolina right now. If you want to go see it, that's
so.
where it
And if
actually
he's got
is.
his order, he's not going to be wondering, where did this go? But then the other thing is too is like whoever was sending that order, were they not wondering when they didn't get the envelope back?
Well, that's the thing is they were all moving out, and it was kind of that's the whole thing.
Like,
You
did no
never
one
know.
question like, where's that empty envelope?
Well, here's the thing about D.H. Hill. He actually lost an order during the 7 Days battle. So he actually had a reputation. So him losing it kind of made sense.
He
at
also
the
got
time.
lost himself at Chickamauga too. So he has a.
And it's also the site they found the letter was the site that he was camped at all day on the 10th. So it all kind of made sense. And so that's who the heck knows, okay? But there's a theory that came out afterwards that it was actually Henry Kidd Douglas who lost them after Thomas Rosser. He said a cigar smoking member of Jackson's staff had them fall out of his pocket, and that was a direct hint at Kidd Douglas. It's unlikely that it was him.
And who knows if Rosser had any kind of bias against Kidd Douglas or whatever. But I read that article too, and like the article was like, it said that just remember Henry Kidd Douglas smoked cigars, and I'm like, okay, so just because somebody smokes cigars, it's now their fault that they lost the order.
But I mean, it makes sense. Hill, he's camped on the same ground. He left his phone twice in Fredericksburg, and he dropped his orders in the 7th on the 7th Day battle. So it kind of made sense. It kind of played the part, right? But even there was even this thought that Lee had purposely left them behind as a rope-a-dope, and when Levy's here, as he's twisting his mustache, and But here's the thing that's weird about this: there's a lot of things that don't make sense about this. On the 12th, it rained all day. It poured. Okay, when they found the envelope on the 13th, on the ground was bone dry. And no one can explain that. It's one of the mysteries of the order. The envelope was bone dry, even though it rained the previous day. So who knows? I mean, it doesn't really matter. But regardless of who dropped them, the real mystery is when they were found. Now, no one doubts the date. It was the 13th of September. But the time of day is where this controversy lies with this thing.
Yep.
The time is important because it is the basis of the belief held by some historians, like Stephen Sears, you mentioned, who say McClellan had these orders early and nothing with them. Some say he did nothing but 12 to 18 hours while Lee happily danced away. And that's just not really true. It's just not.
No, McClellan
His
was
rep
doing stuff that day.
Right. McClellan's reputation is kind of what fuels it. And if you look at the timeline, it paints a very clear
Hmm.
picture that Mac did not sit on his ass with these orders. There's a reason why there's this confusion. Now, General Alpheus Williams, commander of that 12th Corps, and he is owner of the best facial hair in the Civil War, by the way, and
Yeah.
that's not debated. There's no controversy with that. He, like many of his soldiers' diaries, and has included all right that they all got to the site of the best farm around noon.
Yeah.
So that's pretty sure when they think they're going to get there. But there's a source that says they got there earlier. And the reason why people think that it's earlier is from a story told by the hero of Kernstown, Nathan Kimball.
Mm.
According to Kimball, who was part of the Second Corps, he rode ahead to meet with Sergeant Bloss, one of the men who found the cigars. The
Yeah.
order was found. Bloss happened to be Kimball's nephew, because of course he is.
Yeah.
Okay. And according to Kimball, Kimball took the letter personally, right to McClellan,
What?
which is just. And after the war, a lot of the troops just chalked it up to the ramblings of an old man. Said there's no way in hell he
I
did.
thought it
But
was
that's what
Alpheus
he was
Williams
talking.
that took it to him.
But if you're looking for a source
Yeah.
saying it was early, there's your source,
Yeah.
which is kind of maybe the genesis for a lot of this
Mhm.
stuff. It's more likely that the orders were probably sent, they were probably found, I would say probably between noon and 2 o'clock on the
Yeah.
13th, realistically, right? So what's Mac doing at this time?
He's
Most
doing
accounts
a lot.
Most accounts have McClellan arriving in Frederick around 10 o'clock in the morning. This is Frederick Town. If you know the area, Frederick, the town, is not where the best farm is. It's further, it's northeast, and it's with all the people, the congestion, it's a mess. So it's not like the orders were not found at the best farm. That's not where McClellan's headquarters was. He was
No.
actually a little bit further away.
So yeah, it's going to take
He's
a little bit of time for him to get those orders once they are found.
right. He's going to meet with Ambrose Burnside in East Frederick,
Mhm.
and then he's going to visit some troops from the Second Corps. Now, this
Yep.
is all according to the people who saw him. He went to West Frederick afterwards at noontime, and this is substantiated by the fact that he had a meeting to talk with some reinforcements
Mhm.
to help Alfred Pleasanton, whose cavalry was trying to take the Catoctin Gap that afternoon.
Yep.
So he was meeting with them to send replacements, some reinforcements rather. McClellan, and this is where the whole thing goes. This is where it goes off the wagon with this.
Yep.
McClellan's going to send a telegram to Abraham Lincoln, the guy with the hat. Okay. And this telegram is going to be time stamped. It's going to say September 13th, 1862, 12 M. Now, in this telegram, McClellan is going to say, I have the whole rebel force in front of me. The army is moving as rapidly as possible. I have all the plans of the rebels and will catch them in their own trap if my men are equal to the emergency. So clearly in this telegram, Mac is alluding to the fact that he has this order.
Yep.
Now, 12 M normally means 12 noon.
Yep.
But there's a problem, okay? Here's the problem. The copy Lincoln has from his person doesn't say 12 M. It says 12 midnight.
Yeah.
So what seems to back this up is the fact that the timestamp of when it was physically received in Washington is 2:35 a.m. on the 14th of September. So the timing kind of lines up.
Yep.
And here's the other problem with this telegram. In the telegram, Mac is also going to say that we have possession of the Catoctin.
Mhm.
Now, considering he had a meeting at noontime to talk about sending replacements to help take the Catoctin, there's no way he could have sent a telegram saying he had it while he had the meeting to discuss
Exactly.
reinforcements to take it.
Before he even sends Pleasanton out.
So there's that. Oh, and the one more thing. The Rebs had cut the telegraph lines. So he couldn't have sent it at noon anyway.
Nope.
They cut the lines when they left, so he couldn't have. So there's a lot of this of when he has the plans or when he sends it. McClellan is also going to send some telegrams to Henry Halleck.
Mhm.
And one he's going to send is at 11 o'clock p.m. at 9:13, which he clearly discusses these plans now. He's going to tell Halleck, an order of General R.E. Lee addressed to D.H. Hill, which has accidentally come into my hands this evening. That's what he says. The authenticity of which questionable disclosure of the plans of the enemy, and conclusively that the main rebel army is now before me, including Longstreet and Jackson.
Hmm.
So, whatever time this actually was, no matter when it was, when he actually got them, it was clearly well afternoon of the 13th.
Yep. I
Had to
would
have been.
I would say, if I had to guess, I would say he got them sometime after 4 o'clock, because that would be, that would be probably what they would have considered evening time then. But the other thing too is McClellan is not just he's not sitting on his ass doing nothing. He's sending Pleasanton out, and the reason for that is because um, he's been getting reports from citizens trying to figure out what's happening with Lee's army and that. But, you know, Order 191 does talk about how Lee is going to, he's dividing his army. But there's something that, like, there's some evidence that points to the fact that McClellan might have been starting to figure that out already, given the reports he had from citizens, and just people that he knew that were out scouting for him, that Lee was dividing his army. So McClellan was already beginning to suspect that's what was happening.
What McClellan did is he would write his orders at night for the next morning. That
Yep.
was his MO.
Yep.
He'd sit down in his tent at night, he'd write them with the plan. Oh, that plan was going to be sprung the next morning. But when you talk about McClellan in Lost Order 191, you think of timid, to your point, overcautious. But there's a good reason for that, which you just kind of hinted to. Okay, remember when I didn't read orders that started with? I said I'm going to start with 3 and not read 1 and 2.
Yeah.
The reason why I did that is when Mac got these orders, whenever he got them, whenever he finally got them, his orders started with 3. It did not have 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So it started with 3. And that made him very scared for those reasons you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Number 1 and number 2, truthfully, were nothing. They really were. Number 1 merely said, I don't want any soldiers in Fredericks because they hate us.
Yep.
Nobody in Frederick. And number 2 basically said, any soldiers who were too sick or don't have shoes, Major Walter Taylor is going to take them back to Winchester.
Yeah.
No mention he's going to make them pancakes in small mountains, but he's going to take them back to Winchester. That's all it said.
Mm-hmm.
But Mac had no idea what 1 and 2 said. So if you see all these movements and 1 and 2 are missing, it could be a concern. Don't forget, around this time, there are rumors in Washington that Mac clearly knew about, that William Loring's army was going to join Lee.
Yeah.
There was even rumors that Braxton Bragg was going to send a division up to defend Lee. Right.
Yeah.
So he doesn't know this. Mac is also getting reports from the Pennsylvania governor, Andrew Curtin, who's going to send a telegraph to Lincoln on September 12th, almost the same day, the day before, to be accurate, that he had reports.
Mm-hmm.
Curtin's telling Lincoln he has reports that Lee has 190,000 men in Maryland and 250,000 more in Virginia. McClellan had no idea, but he did know that there was another draft in April 62 in the South.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he has no idea. So when they talk about Mac doesn't know, he thinks he's outnumbered, this is where he's getting it from.
Yeah, and he's also getting it from the fact, like, once he starts figuring out Lee's dividing his army, and he kind of gets confirmation of that from 191, to divide your army is a very risky maneuver unless you've got the troops, right? So McClellan is starting to think like, oh shit, I could very well be outnumbered. And he's got, I think, if he's cautious, I mean, I don't blame him with the information that he's got. Like, I mean, they don't have the technology that we have to see this stuff or whatever.
Well,
right?
One more thing though. Okay.
Yeah.
So he has the orders. He doesn't get number 1, and number 2. He doesn't know what it says.
Yeah.
He's hearing these stories from Curtin and the citizens of this monster army. And then you read number 9. Okay. I'm going to read the exact quote of what it says. This is the Special Order 191, number 9. The commands of Generals Jackson, McLaws, and Walker, after accomplishing the objects which they have been attached, Harper's Ferry, will join the main body of the army in Boonesboro. If you're reading that and it says the commands of General Jackson, McLaws, and Walker, then they're going to join the main army.
Yeah.
What the hell's this main army?
Yeah.
So you're reading this, you go, who is Boones? What is this? So if you're getting all this information, of course you're going to be concerned about it. I mean, is it a surprise he thought he had less men? I mean, he gets bashed for this, but the reality is you're only as good as the intel you're getting.
Yeah.
For Mac, this is a dogs and cats living together mass hysteria situation
Yeah,
now.
like I would be thinking like, holy shit, how big is this army? And if he's able to divide it, like I mean, that's risky. You're not going to divide it unless you've got the forces to do it. And then what Curtin's writing him and everything else. And of course, they don't have time to substantiate the claims. They don't. They don't have time to send people out and be like, yeah, we can confirm this number for you, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Now,
you know.
what was the task that Halleck and Lincoln both gave McClellan? No matter what you do, you still have to do this, right? You got to protect Washington.
Yeah.
So now you got this in here too. Halleck is going to telegram McClellan on 9/13. He's going to
Mhm.
say, until you are certain of the enemy's force south of the Potomac in Virginia, you are wrong in uncovering the capital. So what Halleck is telling him is this: we think this whole thing's a ruse to get you to chase them into
Yeah.
Maryland. And then this monstrous 250,000 man army is going to come in the back door through the Savannah and
Ooh.
take Washington. So now, and then he says in the quote, beware the evils I point out to you. So you think your boss sucks? I mean, can you imagine trying to figure this stuff out?
Oh my
So
god. Well, this is
now,
like typical Halleck though being kind of a dick as well.
not exactly. And look, we're not going to be McClellan apologists,
No.
but put yourself in his shoes now.
Mhm.
You've got this order which talks about this army spread out. And he's thinking Lee is a genius militarily. If he doesn't know he has more men than I do, why the hell would he split them up like this in enemy territory and,
Yep.
and separate them up? And certainly, why the hell would you leave an order behind saying where the hell you're going? So it's just enough gray area to really put a caution into him.
Mhm.
So when you talk about being cautious and there's so many men, this is where it comes from. So what are Lee's men doing at this time? So D.H. Hill's division is in Boonesboro. Jones' division is still south of the Potomac, and Jackson is surrounding Harper's Ferry, which is ultimately going to fall to the largest capture of Union troops in the war. This is the George Lamb Willard,
Yep.
Harper's Ferry cowards thing. That's all going to happen then. Lee sort of makes an audible at the line of scrimmage at this time, too. He's going to send Longstreet over to Hagerstown,
Mhm.
which is about 15 miles away in north of Boonesboro, probably to get supplies in Antietam Brewery, probably. That's exactly what I would do. But Longstreet's actually sent there for a couple of reasons. He's going to raid Union supplies. He's going to take out some local militia who are reportedly in that area. And he's also going to kind of block the passage that leads to Pennsylvania. So if Andrew Curtin's going to send troops, they're going to be able to slow them down.
Yeah.
So I mentioned the roads in Frederick are a tough task to get through anyway, especially when you're moving 80 to 90,000 men through them. These are the guys going to chase Lee's men, and they're ultimately going to do it. But they're not sitting on their asses on the 13th. So you've been hinting this a couple times now. That being said, the Union troops were on the move on orders from McClellan the night before on the 12th,
Yep.
which is before the order was even found.
Yeah.
So regardless of this order, 191 or not, this order did not spur McClellan to go into finding Lee. He was already doing
Yep,
it at
because
the
of
time.
intel he was getting from citizens and all that, and he's sending Pleasanton out. And, I've always questioned the whole McClellan sat on his ass for 12 to 16 hours when he finds order 191. He gets it probably afternoon, evening on the 13th. And it's it's hours. It's like not even 24 hours later, they're fighting the Battle of South Mountain. So that's why I really have never bought the whole he sat on his ass thing, because he's actually
Yeah,
doing stuff and he's
the time doesn't work out.
the time it doesn't. And when you're getting stuff from Halleck, when you're getting like Curtin's telling Halleck this is how many troops he has, and you get this order that's basically implying Lee's dividing his army, you're beginning to suspect that from intelligence you're getting. So you're going to start thinking, shit, he might have more men. I mean, I'd probably think the same thing too. I mean, we're not being McClellan apologists, but we're trying to look at it from his perspective as an army commander. That, the only reason the army you're about to fight would divide themselves up is because they have superior forces to you, right? And they know it.
You know who else commented of how fast McClellan was moving was Robert E. Lee.
Yeah.
He's going to write a letter to Jefferson Davis on the 16th of September, right before Antietam, talking about the night of the 13th. He's going to write. And I quote, learning that night, the 13th, that Harper's Ferry had not yet surrendered and the enemy was advancing more rapidly than convenient from Fredericktown. So he knew on the 13th McClellan was coming, and that
Hmm.
surprised him. By the end of the night on 9/13, two divisions from the Ninth Corps are already in Middletown near Turner's Gap at South Mountain. These movements were all made, like we said, prior to the finding of 191. Contrary to popular belief, the Union Army was just, they weren't sitting idle. They were moving all along. Alfred Pleasanton, the cavalry guy, he's going to get a copy of Lost Order 191 sometime late in the afternoon on 9/13. And he will send horsemen to Harper's Ferry to see what was afoot at the Circle K. Now, his report is going to confirm that Jackson is, in fact, at Harper's Ferry.
Yeah.
So, despite concerns about the authenticity of this lost order and that maybe it was a rope-a-dope by Lee, Mack is now feeling pretty damn good about this intel. He thinks he has the golden ticket.
Yeah.
So, what's that famous quote he says to Gibbon?
He says, "With this order, I can whip Bobby Lee, or I will go home."
So he's thinking, I'm going to get this guy now. So by 6:30 p.m. on 9/13, McClellan, like we said, the night before, he always writes his battle orders. He's writing his battle plan for Burnside and William Franklin for the next day. It'll begin at 9 o'clock in the morning on the 14th when the Ninth Corps, using Jesse Reno, will attack Fox's Gap to hit D.H. Hill's division, while that First Corps under Fighting Joe Hooker is going to move on to Turner's Gap, where he's expected to attack by noon. Turner's Gap, of course, will be the birth of the Iron Brigade, and of course, this will be the Battle of South Mountain. So this is within hours. So this is probably going to be very soon afterwards. The rest of McClellan's army is moving too, but they're stuck in that human traffic jam that is Frederick. Probably that construction we got stuck in. We had to go around and around.
What a nightmare.
Right? But the question that always seems to come up, too, there's many questions with this, is when did Robert E. Lee discover McClellan had a copy of this lost order? And this is another mystery, another enigma, if you want to call it that, right? Now, we said before, based on the letter he wrote to Davis on the 13th, he already knew the troops were moving, and they were moving really quickly.
Yeah.
But those troops were tasked to move before the order. So they were kind of already going. And there's a lot of different stories of when this thing was. One story actually came from Lee himself. He talked about it in 1868. And this is kind of a mystery to him, too. Lee says he did talk about it. He says that according to Lee, Jeb Stuart, he had a spy embedded in McClellan's headquarters who told him around 11 o'clock in the morning on the 13th of September that Mack became very excited about a piece of paper he found. Now, the timing doesn't work out, first of all.
No, 11 o'clock
because
in the morning.
Mack 11 o'clock in the morning. Well, Mack was there, but he was, at this point, he was moving around between East and West Frederick. He was meeting with Burnside. He was going to get he was not in his headquarters. Stuart also told Lee that the spy came to him around dusk on 9/13 while Stuart was at Turner's Gap and rushed to him with the news on horseback. Now, considering where Mack was, okay, he would have had to read the story at 11 o'clock in the morning per the spy. And the fact that Turner's Gap is about 10 miles away, it's hard to imagine that on horse it would have taken 6 hours to get there.
Yeah.
As you know, you can roller skate backwards with your bandana and your whistle and get there faster than 6 hours on a horse, realistically. There's that. The other issue with Stuart, up until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, was at Catoctin, which is about just 3 miles away from where Mack allegedly was. So wouldn't the spy have just gone there for 2 o'clock and not?
Yeah,
I don't know.
probably.
So there's a lot of things that don't make sense.
Yeah, a lot of stuff with the timeline does
One
not
thing
make
that is
sense.
true is on the 15th of September, Lost Order 191 was in the northern newspapers.
Yeah.
Somebody leaked it, which was a gigantic, in the middle of a military campaign, this strategic piece of military intelligence got leaked to a northern newspaper, and they've read it in the Yankee papers. Now, no wonder William Sherman and Bill Belichick hate the media. Think about it. It makes total sense.
Yeah,
Right?
that's a huge thing for it to be seen there, and can't imagine what Lee's reaction was to that when he found out about it.
So regardless when he found it out, Lee did mobilize his men very quickly to Sharpsburg. So he pulled them out of Sharpsburg. So he likely knew about it not he probably had the combination of McClellan moving fast upon him.
Yep.
He heard about it, and he did finally get to Boonesboro. He did blow the conch shell pretty quickly. Now, despite the idea that some people that Mac had Lee's battle plan, he didn't.
No.
And also, this order, when he found it, was 3 days old. That was missing a section describing where Lee's men were going, not the ultimate plan, what it was, which to many accounts was Harrisburg. So the info McClellan received still left him in that gray area because of the info he was getting, which was proven to be incorrect, that came from Andrew Curtin and Henry Halleck. So the bottom line is this, right? Based on what he's hearing, he did think he was clearly outnumbered,
Yep.
and despite that, he still moved his men quickly to force Lee to fight at Sharpsburg, and he threw a real wrench into Lee's plan to invade Pennsylvania. There's no question that that's what that did.
Yep. No,
right?
he did.
So, Lost Order 191, the single greatest military intelligence coup in history, right up there with the code breakers of World War II. I mean, that's an eye of the beholder situation right there. Is McClellan really unfairly blamed for being slow? I think he clearly is, because he really wasn't slow.
He is.
The communication that Lee and Halleck, that Lincoln and Halleck was given to him, just shows how fast he was clearly moving to prove that, right? What Lost Order 191 did do was it did give George McClellan a good idea where Lee's men were, but gave him no idea what the ultimate plan was. And the Union general was basically forced to make decisions in real time based on intel that was clearly wrong against a shrewd enemy who kind of knew how to fight, right?
Exactly, yeah. And I think, too, what Order 191 did was it confirmed some of the intelligence that McClellan already had that was accurate, that Lee was dividing his army. But he didn't know numbers other than what he's getting from Halleck and, Andrew Curtin. And again, like I said, if your enemy is dividing their army, that's a risky move. So therefore, he's assuming that Lee must have large numbers, right? And like you said, like when they're supposed to all meet at Boonesboro, what does that mean? I'd be worried too. And I think I think McClellan does get unfairly blamed for this. It's really the timeline part of it that doesn't add up at all. Like, there is no 12 or 16 hours that he's sitting on his ass. He's not. He's mobilizing his troops. He's writing out a battle plan for the next day. He's already sent Pleasanton out. He sent troops out on the 12th as well. So he's doing stuff. He's not just sitting there.
But the one person who would disagree with Stephen Sears of the world when it comes to McClellan is Robert Lee himself. And he said this after the war about this 191. He says, had the lost dispatch not been lost, and had McClellan continued his cautious policy for 2 or 3 days longer, I would have had all my troops reconcentrated and he ended up calling the Lost Order a great calamity, is what he called it. Wow. So what resulted was Lee was basically pushed back to Virginia after cutting his invasion short, which ultimately led to the Battle of Antietam, followed by the Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. But what Lost Order 191 is going to do, it's going to end up being debated forever because there's so many sources that talk about it, and it became such a big deal after the war, finger pointing towards who lost it, glory of who found it, how important it was. Some people found it was more important than others. Was Lee using this to kind of as an excuse to why he got beat at Antietam, even though he really didn't? It was close, but he did get driven back. So it's tough to say. It'll never be a fact. That's why you're going to have different historians who are going to use it to bash McClellan. There are going to be others who are going to use it to praise McClellan, and then everywhere else is somewhere in the middle. So make up your own mind.
Exactly.
Read up on 191. Decide for yourself what it was. My own personal opinion is I think the Union Army moved faster than expected. I think Lost Order 191 gave them a little bit of a push, although they were already starting to go there. But clearly what it did do is it did force Lee to concentrate on the banks there at the Antietam River and Antietam Creek. And what it did is it did force him to cut his plan short instead of going to Harrisburg. So if you look at the big picture, he didn't make it to Harrisburg. And of course, everybody knows he's going to try again a year later. But at the end of the day, what it did do, it did give that Union Army that shot in the arm they needed. Lee promised his cabinet that if he pushed Lee back over the Potomac River, he was going to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, which led to a lot of things like arming free black
Yep.
slaves, free black men rather join the army, and all the stuff he did. So you can make a case that's very important. You can make a case that's not important. So there you have it. Decide for yourself.
I agree with you what you said about it. I think McClellan is unfairly treated. I mean, yeah, McClellan is. I mean, he is his own problem at times. He's very arrogant. You know, some of the stuff that he says behind people's backs is whatever. But I think in this case, he is getting, you know, unfairly blamed for not, like, I mean, there's no 12 hours that he's not moving. And I think a lot of our perception that we have of 191 comes from some of our secondary sources today, that one or two authors, or, you know, maybe more than that, are writing about it in a certain way. And that's their interpretation. It does not mean they're wrong. But then other authors kind of follow suit because they're, I don't know if they're maybe afraid to go against what, you know, someone else has said or whatever. But, you know, again, it's history. There can be new evidence that comes to light. There can be someone that comes along that interprets the historical record in a different way, uses a source that wasn't used before, and, you know, it starts getting interpreted in a different way. And I think that's the great thing about history is we'll never really know all there is to know about 191 and all that, but I think it's a really cool thing in history. I don't think it's like as big a deal as, you know, some people make it to be, but it's debated so much that we had to do an episode about it.
No, dog. We said it was the fifth lost order that summer alone, and it's important. It's the most famous one, and so it's fun to talk about no matter what side you're on. So I think it's a good place to drop it
Yep.
from now. But I would suggest anybody do homework on it, read up on it. There's a lot of great sources on it. Decide for yourselves.
Yep.
But the timeline doesn't add up to McClellan sitting on his butt for 12 to 18 hours. It just doesn't add up. But read and decide for yourself. So what's coming up for us next, Mary? What's down the pipe for us?
We are probably going to do a couple of, not, I don't want to say lighthearted episodes, but just some stuff we've been talking about doing for a while, where we're just going to kind of sit down and have our usual bar conversation. It's not going to be battle focused. It's going to be about a couple other things that we have some ideas about. But yeah, we will be getting back to battles again soon. We will be announcing stuff about the last two books in our book club for 2022 as well. We're going to be announcing our books for 2023 soon as well. We had a great roundtable last night. We will be having another one in October, so stay tuned for that. And as always, Darren, thank you for being the amazing co-host that you are. And thank you to our listeners for everything, all your support these last 93 episodes. And hopefully we'll see you on our Facebook Live later today or this morning.
Off we go.
When this episode drops.
Off we go. All right. Have a great time. Any final words from you, Fincheru?
Oh, just thank you for being you and for all the hard work you put into this podcast.
Oh, it's always a lot of fun. It's always a lot of fun. All right, everybody. But thanks for listening. We appreciate it. We'll catch up with you soon. Have a safe end of the week. Have a good weekend. Hope to see you on Saturday at our Facebook Live, and hope we'll see you down the road. All right, off we go. Have a great weekend, everybody.
See you guys later.
Peace out.
Bye.